Thank you very much, Rowan. So my talk is based in 4 sections: introduction, a talk about terminology, then I'm going to review a head of school survey I did, then talk about some various models. These are entirely my views at the end. They're not the summative views of the heads of school. So when I was given this project, I thought, right, well, there's my destination on the far side. I'll take this little track down, cross the water and get across, but this would obviously take some time. So in a true surgical way, I thought I'd build a bridge and go straight across. Then I started making some inquiries and looking into the shape of training. And it then became clear that the destination wasn't that clear. And actually, it wasn't a straight line. There was a bend in the road. And I wasn't quite sure how fast I was travelling down the road. But I do believe that this is an opportunity to improve training. As said, the endpoint hasn't been defined, and I'm unclear about the timescales. I do believe that this is going to be an evolution, and it's not going to be a big bang. On further inquiries, I became aware that the language being used varied, and it is very clear that a general surgeon is a very different animal from a general cardiothoracic surgeon. So the word generalism has some connotations. Subspecialties and specialisms, that's interesting because the GMC only recognizes one surgical subspecialty, and that is congenital cardiac surgery. Everything else is special interests. So again, the language I found it confusing. So what started off, I thought, with lovely, clear, azure water has now turned into quite muddy, troubled waters. So I went to my colleagues, the heads of school, for their advice and support. And I did a survey with Mike Bradburn. He helped me put some questions together, and we went to the heads of school. And for those from abroad, our honoured guests, the UK is divided into areas. These are now called LETBs, Local Education Training Boards. And the head of school of each of these areas manages the surgical trainees. And we do meet twice a year, and this is a picture of us just to prove that we do exist. Right, so the first question I asked was, have you read the Greenaway report? And I was gratified to see that they all had, so that's good, we knew where we were starting. And the specialty interests are interesting. They're not all general surgeons, there's a mixture here. Do you have any concerns with the move of full registration from end of foundation to end of medical school? 9 had concerns, 3 didn't. Do you believe that a period of broad-based training relevant to the specialty interest will enhance patient safety? 9 did, 3 didn't. Do you think training in team working, patient safety, communication skills, and research evaluation would benefit surgical education? They all thought that was good. Do you believe a surgeon can be trained to emergency competence within 6 years of completion of the foundation programme in the current structure in the UK? Everybody felt it couldn't. To a low level, probably. However, we should not aspire to adequate but excellent. With the current structure, no. No, the way service is provided needs to be restructured in order to make this possible. Training needs to be focused and targeted from the start. It needs to be dependent and not opportunistic as it is at present. Do you believe a surgeon trained as outlined in the Greenaway report will be safe to be on call without a supervising doctor? No, but I think Greenaway expects there to be a series of specialists to pick up the complex cases, and the CST doctor will be a junior consultant. The trainees often need some form of mentoring. This should be strengthened and formalised. SAFE requires not only the consultation, examination and operative skills, but also the decision-making skills, some of which are acquired over time. The current time constraints limit the acquisition of this skill. Do you believe that a consultant surgeon working unsupervised and trained in the time outlined in this report will be a risk to patient safety? Yes, as things presently stand in the training in the UK. I think that always the system will compensate for poor performance by the use of mentoring. Do you believe that this report will be implemented as it stands? No, not without investment. Without investment and further changes relative to each specialty, it could be a disaster. No, it's intended for medicine, was another head of school's thought. So do you think SPRs are overtrained for their consultant appointment? Everybody felt this was not the case. Even the best SPRs still want and need mentoring. I've covered the on-calls for 2 new colleagues for 2 years. They were excellent trainees, but still wanted cover. No, as witnessed by the fact that we have some of the best surgical leaders and researchers and outcomes in the world. Do you think SPRs are too specialised for their consultant appointment? And this is interesting because the heads of school here split. It depends on the specialty. And no, I do think that there is no coordination about appointments. It would be better to train juniors to a lower level, appoint them to post as consultant, then send them on subspecialty training. Do you think SPRs spend too long in their training prior to their consultant appointment? And only 2 felt that they do. 10 felt they didn't. No, only barely enough, as witnessed by trainees disappearing after CCT for fellowships. Know about the right for generalists, but not long enough for a specialist. It will be interesting to see how the vascular trainees get on. No, training in generality to a higher level is a good thing. Subspecialisation is a bad thing. Training could be shorter if it was focused on set competences. So that was the heads of school survey, and I think it gives you a flavour of what the heads of school felt. I'm now just going to discuss the right-hand end of this diagram we have already been taken through. So I'm going to look at this for certain specialties. So this is general surgery. Now, do we see the model being that a trainee comes through 4 to 6 years, gets his CST, so that he is now managing the illest and sickest patients in the hospital, and then maybe through a series of competitive selection goes into his or her subspecialty interest with robust structures for post-CST credentialing. Not everybody is going to get into their subspecialist interest, so there will be some who are left behind at CST level. Or is the broad-based specialty training actually going to be themed so that they get their CST, but they're already a colorectal upper GI surgeon, breast HPB, in 4 to 6 years and looking after the sickest and illest patients in the hospital? So that's general surgery. What about urology? A broad-based training for 4 to 6 years. The urologists are looking after the illest and sickest patients in the hospital, and then through competitive selection, perhaps they'll go into their subspecialist interests, again with credentialing. Or are they going to, in their broad-based training, have it heavily themed so that when they finish their 4 or 6 years, they've already got their subspecialist interest and they're able to look after the illest and sickest patients in the hospital with an interest in cancer or stones? ENT, a similar picture. Is there going to be general broad-based training and then CST, looking after the sickest and illest patients in the hospital? But there's a problem with ENT because 95 to 98% of emergency admissions in ENT are treated medically. So this model perhaps doesn't fit for ENT training. So TNO, our trainee is going to go through broad-based training for 6 years, look after the sickest patients in the hospital, and then develop their subspecialist interests. But I see a problem in TNO, because in TNO, most, not all, but most trauma and orthopedic surgeons wish to drop their trauma commitment fairly soon after they have qualified and get interested in their own subspecialty interest. These are the other surgical subspecialist interests, and at the moment I'm not clear how Greenaway is going to address these. And I do think it's important, as one head of school said, it's important what the employers want. Now, I looked at the last 7 weeks BMJ adverts, and as you can see, they're all subspecialty interests, with emergency general surgery. This is the new general surgeon who looks after the acute unwell patients. Now, most trainees I look after are still maintaining their own subspecialist interest, and the emergency general surgeons being appointed in my area are usually staff grades who have been around a long time, and then they get a consultant post in their hospital. So I do think more dialogue is wanted with the employers. And at the moment, I think employers are persuaded by the consultant body. The consultants will go to them and say, we need another colorectal surgeon, so a colorectal surgeon is advertised for. So I think it's important that employers are engaged with more, and if possible, we can get some decent workforce modelling to see what the new picture with the demographic changes is going to be. And I also think it's really important, if we shorten training, that we don't just produce technicians. Otherwise, what's the point of going to medical school if you're just there to do an operation? And we all know the saying that a surgeon knows when to operate, a good surgeon knows when to operate, and an excellent surgeon knows when not to operate. I must admit, I spend a lot of my on-calls not operating, and I think it's really important that we train people to this standard. So, in summary, I do suspect there are opportunities for training. I think it's for us, the surgical profession, to sort out what happens in surgery. I think this is going to be an evolution and not a big bang. I'm very concerned that it's not a return to run-through training. I think it's important that we do have a gap between core training and higher surgical training. And I'm also concerned about the broadening of the foundation programme. The Greenaway report shows that this is 2 years of foundation training. In KSS, I'm losing just over 110 Foundation Year 1 posts next year because they're going out to community and general practice and psychiatry. And in future, aspiring medical students who want to be surgeons will only be able to spend 4 months in their first 2 years of their foundation training. So I have concern about broadening the foundation training and us attracting surgeons into the surgical profession. Who's going to design it? Well, we've heard from Ian about implementation. I think the people who are going to actually design it are going to be the SACs, but I'm going to be interested in people's comments on that. And who implements it? Well, I suspect it will be the schools who will be implementing the new programme. So thank you very much.